Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to our Sunday Krishna book reading to Srila Prabhupada here in Sri Vrindavan Dham in his sacred room. And as we always do, let us offer our respectful obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and to each other. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paskacha Deshatarane. And to each other, Panchakalpadrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So for those of you online, we're on chapter 54. Krishna defeats all the princes and takes Rukmini home to Dwarka. And we concluded almost half the chapter last Sunday. So we're beginning with, almost halfway through, the example of the sunshine and the material manifestation is very appropriate in understanding the living entity's contact with the material world. In the morning, the sun rises, and the heat and light gradually expand throughout the whole day. The sun is the cause of all material shapes and forms, for it is due to the sun that integration and disintegration of material elements take place. But as soon as the sun sets, the whole manifestation is no longer connected to the sun, which has passed from one place to another. When the sun passes from the eastern to the western hemisphere, the results of the interactions due to the sunshine in the eastern hemisphere remain, but the sunshine itself is visible in the western hemisphere. Similarly, the living entity accepts or produces different bodies and different bodily relationships in a particular circumstance. But as soon as he gives up the present body and accepts another, he has nothing to do with the former body. Similarly, the living entity has nothing to do with the next body he accepts. He is always free from the contact of this bodily contamination. Therefore, continued Balaram, the appearance and disappearance of the body have nothing to do with the living entity, just as the waxing and waning of the moon have nothing to do with the moon. When the moon waxes, we falsely think that the moon is developing, and when it wanes, we think the moon is decreasing. Factually, the moon, as it is always the same. It has nothing to do with such visible activities of waxing and waning. We want to bring your attention, those online, to the subtitles at the bottom of the page so you can follow along nicely.
Lord Balarama continued, one's consciousness in material existence can be compared to sleeping and dreaming. When a man sleeps, he dreams of many non-factual happenings, and as a result of dreaming, he becomes subject to different kinds of distress and happiness. Similarly, when a person is in the dream of material consciousness, he suffers the effects of accepting a body and giving it up again in material existence. Opposite to this material consciousness is Krishna consciousness. In other words, when a man is elevated to the platform of Krishna consciousness, he becomes free from this false conception of life.
In this way, Sri Balarama instructed Rukmini in spiritual knowledge. He further addressed his sister-in-law thus: Sweet smiling Rukmini, do not be aggrieved by false notions caused by ignorance. Only because of false notions does one become unhappy, but one can immediately remove this unhappiness by discussing the philosophy of actual life. Be happy on that platform only.
After hearing such enlightening instructions from Sri Balarama, Rukmini immediately became pacified and happy and adjusted her mind, which was very much afflicted by the degraded position of her brother Rukmi. As far as Rukmi was concerned, his promise was not fulfilled, nor was his mission successful. He had come from home with his soldiers and military phalanx to defeat Krishna and release his sister. But on the contrary, he lost all his soldiers and military strength. He was personally degraded and very sorry. But by the grace of the Lord, he could continue his life to its fixed destination. Because he was a Kshatriya, he could remember his promise that he would not return to his capital city, Kundina, without killing Krishna and releasing his sister, which he had failed to do. Therefore, he decided in anger not to return to his capital city, and he constructed a small cottage in the village known as Bhojakat, where he resided for the rest of his life.
After defeating all the opposing elements and forcibly carrying away Rukmani, Krishna brought her to his capital city, Dwaraka, and then married her according to the Vedic ritualistic principles. After this marriage, Krishna became the king of the Yadu at Dwaraka. On the occasion of his marriage with Rukmani, all the inhabitants were happy, and in every house there were great ceremonies. The inhabitants of Dwaraka city were so much pleased that they dressed themselves with the nicest possible ornaments and garments and went to present gifts according to their means to the new married couple, Krishna and Rukmani. All the house of Yadupuri, Dwaraka, were decorated with flags, festoons, and flowers. Each and every house had an extra gate specifically prepared for this occasion, and on the both sides of the gate were big water jugs filled with water. The whole city was made fragrant by the burning of fine incense, and at night there was illumination from thousands of lamps which decorated every building.
The entire city appeared jubilant on the occasion of Lord Krishna's marriage with Rukmini. Everywhere in the city there were profuse decorations of banana trees and betel nut trees. These two trees are considered very auspicious in happy ceremonies. At the same time, there was an assembly of many elephants who carried the respective kings of different friendly kingdoms. It is the habit of the elephant that whenever he sees some small plants and trees, out of his sportive and frivolous nature, he uproots the trees and throws them hither and thither. The elephants assembled on this occasion also scattered the banana and betel nut trees. But in spite of such intoxicated action, the whole city, with the trees thrown here and there, looked very nice.
The friendly kings of the Kurus and the Pandavas were represented by Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, the 5 Pandava brothers, King Drupad, King Santandana, and Rukmini's father, Bhishmaka. Because of Krishna's kidnapping Rukmini, There was initially some misunderstanding between the two families, but Bhishmaka, king of Vidarbha, being approached by Sri Balaram and persuaded by many saintly persons, was induced to participate in the marriage ceremony of Krishna and Rukmini. Although the incident of the kidnapping was not a very happy occurrence in the kingdom of Vidarbha, kidnapping was not an unusual affair among Kshatriyas. Kidnapping was in fact current in almost all their marriages. Anyway, King Bhishmaka was from the very beginning inclined to hand over his beautiful daughter to Krishna. In one way or another, his purpose had been served, and so he was pleased to join the marriage ceremony, even though his eldest son was degraded in the fight. It is mentioned in the Padma Purana that Maharaj Nanda and the cowherd boys of Vrindavan joined the marriage ceremony. Kings from the kingdoms of Kuru, Srinjaya, Kekaya, Vidarbha, and Kunti all came to Dwarka on this occasion and met with one another very joyfully.
The story of Rukmini's being kidnapped by Krishna was poeticized and professional readers recited it everywhere. All the assembled kings and their daughters especially were struck with wonder and very much pleased upon hearing the chivalrous activities of Krishna. In this way, all the visitors as well as the inhabitants of Dwarka city were joyful to see Krishna and Rukmini together. In other words, the goddess of fortune was now united with the Supreme Lord, the maintainer of everyone, and thus all the people felt extremely jubilant. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 54th chapter of Krishna. Krishna defeats all the princes and takes Rukmini home to Dwaraka. Hari Bol.
Chapter 55. Pradyumna born to Krishna and Rukmini. It is said that Cupid, who is directly part and parcel of Lord Vasudeva and who was formerly burnt to ashes by the anger of Lord Shiva, took birth from the womb of Rukmini, begotten by Krishna. This is Kamadeva, a demigod of the heavenly planets, especially capable of inducing lusty desires. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has many grades of parts and parcels, but the quadruple expansions of Krishna, Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Anirudra, are directly in the Vishnu category. Kama, or the Cupid demigod, who later took his birth from the womb of Rukmini, was also named Pradyumna, but he cannot be the Pradyumna of the Vishnu category. He belongs to the category of Jiva Tattva, but for exhibiting a special power in the category of demigods, he was a part and parcel of the supreme prowess of Pradyumna. That is the verdict of the Goswamis. Therefore, when Cupid was burnt to ashes by the anger of Lord Shiva, he merged into the body of Vasudeva, and to get his body again, he was begotten in the womb of Rukmini by Lord Krishna himself. Thus, he was born as the son of Krishna and celebrated by the name Pradyumna. Because he was begotten by Lord Krishna directly, his qualities were most similar to those of Krishna.
There was a demon of the name Shambhara who was destined to be killed by Pradyumna. The Shambhara demon knew of his destiny, and as soon as he learned that Pradyumna had been born, he took the shape of a woman and kidnapped the baby from the maternity home. Less than 10 days after his birth, the demon took him and threw him directly into the sea. But as it is said, Whoever is protected by Krishna, no one can kill, and whoever is destined to be killed by Krishna, no one can protect. When Pradyumna was thrown into the sea, a big fish immediately swallowed him. Later, this fish was caught in the net of a fisherman, and the fish was later sold to the Shambhara demon. In the kitchen of the demon was a maid servant whose name was Mayavati. This woman had formerly been the wife of Cupid called Rati. When the fish was presented to the demon Shambhara, it was taken charge of by his cook, who was to make it into a palatable fish preparation. Demons and Rakshasas are accustomed to eat meat, fish, and similar non-vegetarian foods. Demons like Ravana, Kams, and Hiranyakashipu, although born of Brahman and Kshatriya fathers, used to take meat and flesh without discrimination. This practice is still prevalent in India, and those who eat meat and fish are generally called demons and Rakshasas.
When the cook was cutting the fish, he found within its stomach a nice baby, which immediately presented to the charge of Mayavati, who was an assistant in the kitchen affairs. This woman was surprised to see how such a nice baby could remain within the belly of a fish, and the situation perplexed her. The great sage Narad then appeared and explained to her about the birth of Pradyumna and how the baby had been taken away by Sambal and later thrown into the sea. In this way, the whole story was disclosed to Mayavati. Mayavati knew that she had previously been Rati, the wife of Cupid, after her husband was burned to ashes by the wrath of Lord Shiva. She was always expecting him to come back in a material form. This woman was engaged for cooking rice and dal in the kitchen. But when she got this nice baby and understood that he was Cupid, her own husband, she naturally took charge of him and with great affection began to bath him regularly. Miraculously, the baby swiftly grew up, and within a very short period, he became a beautiful young man. His eyes were just like the petals of lotus flowers, and his arms were long, reaching down to his knees. Any woman who happened to see him was captivated by his worldly beauty.
Mayavati could understand that her former husband, Cupid, born as Pradyumna, had grown into such a nice young man, and she also gradually became captivated and lusty. Smiling before him with a feminine attractiveness, she expressed her desire for sexual union. He therefore inquired from her, "How is it possible that first you were affectionate like a mother, and now you are expressing the symptoms of a lusty woman? What is the reason for such a change?" On hearing this statement from Pradyumna, the woman Rati replied, "My dear sir, you are the son of Lord Krishna. Before you were 10 days old, you were stolen by the Shambhara demon and later thrown into the water and swallowed by a fish. In this way, you have come under my care. But actually, in your former life as Cupid, I was your wife. Therefore, my manifestation of conjugal symptoms is not at all incompatible. Sambara wanted to kill you, and he is endowed with various mystic powers. Therefore, before he again attempts to kill you, please kill him as soon as possible with your divine power. Since you were stolen by Sambara, your mother, Rukmini Devi, has been in a very grievous condition, like a kurari bird who has lost her babies. She is very affectionate toward you, and since you have been taken away from her, she has been living like a cow aggrieved over the loss of its calf."
Mayavati had mystic knowledge of supernatural powers. Supernatural powers are generally known as Maya, and to surpass all such powers, there is another supernatural power called Mahamaya. Mayavati had the knowledge of the mystic power of Mahamaya, and she delivered to the Pradyumna this specific energetic power in order to defeat the mystic powers of the Sambara demon. Thus, being empowered by his wife, Pradyumna immediately went before Sambara and challenged him to fight. Pradyumna addressed him in a very strong language so that his temper would be agitated and he would be moved to fight. At Pradyumna's words, the demon Sambara, being insulted, fell just as a snake feels after being struck by someone's foot. A serpent cannot tolerate being kicked by another animal or by a man, and it immediately bites its opponent.
Shambhara felt the words of Pradyumna as if they were a kick. He immediately took his club in his hand and appeared before Pradyumna to fight. Roaring like a thundering cloud, in great anger the demon began to fight to beat Pradyumna with his club, just as a thunderbolt beats a mountain. Pradyumna protected himself with his own club and eventually struck the demon very severely. In this way, the fighting between Sambasura and Pradyumna began in earnest.
But Sambarasura knew the art of mystic powers and could raise himself into the sky and fight from outer space. There is a demon of the name Maya, and Sambarasura had learned many mystic powers from him. He thus raised himself high into the sky and threw various types of nuclear weapons at the body of Pradyumna. To combat the mystic powers of Sambarasura, Pradyumna invoked another mystic power known as Mahavidya, which was different from the black mystic power. The Mahavidya mystic power is based on the quality of goodness. Sambara, understanding that his enemy was formidable, took assistance from various kinds of demoniac mystic powers belonging to the Guyakas, the Gandharvas, the Pitaras, the snakes, and the Rakshasas. But although the demon exhibited his mystic powers and took shelter of supernatural strength, Pradyumna was able to counteract his strength and powers by the superior power of Mahavidya. When Sambarasura was defeated in every respect, Pradyumna took his sharp sword and immediately cut off the demon's head, which was decorated with a helmet and valuable jewels. When Pradyumna thus killed the demon, all the demigods in the higher planetary systems showered flowers on him.
Pradyumna's wife, Mayavati, could travel in outer space, and therefore they directly reached Dwarka, his father's capital, by the airways. They passed above the palace of Lord Krishna and came down as a cloud comes down with lightning. The inner section of the palace is known as the Antapura, this private apartments. Pradyumna and Mayavati could see many women there, and they sat down among them. When the woman saw Pradyumna dressed in yellowish garment with very long arms, curling hair, beautiful reddish eyes, a smiling face, jewelry and ornaments, they at first could not recognize him as a personality different from Krishna. They all felt very bashful as the sudden presence of Krishna and wanted to hide in a different corner of the palace.
When the woman saw, however, that not all the characteristics of Lord Krishna were present in the personality of Pradyumna. Out of curiosity, they came back to see him and his wife Mayavati. All of them were conjecturing as to who he was, for he was so beautiful. Among the women was Rukmini Devi, who was equally beautiful with her lotus-like eyes. Seeing Pradyumna, she naturally remembered her own son, and milk began to flow from her breasts out of motherly affection. She then began to wonder, who is this beautiful young boy? He appears to be the most beautiful person. Who is the fortunate young woman able to conceive this nice boy in her womb? And because his mother and became his mother. And who is that young woman who has accompanied him? How have they met? Remembering my own son, who was stolen from the maternity home, I can only guess that if he is living somewhere, he might have grown by this time to be like this boy. Simply by intuition, Rukmini could understand that Pradyumna was her own lost son. She could also observe that Pradyumna resembled Lord Krishna in every respect. She was struck with wonder as to how he had acquired all the characteristics of Lord Krishna. She therefore began to think more confidently that the boy must be her own grown-up son, because she felt so much affection for him, and as an auspicious sign, her left arm was trembling.
At that very moment, Lord Krishna, along with his father and mother, Devaki and Vasudeva, appeared on the scene. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, could understand everything, and in that situation he remained silent. However, by the desire of Lord Sri Krishna, the great sage Narada also appeared, and he disclosed all the incidents, how Pradyumna had been stolen from the maternity home, and how he had grown up and had come there with his wife Mayavati, who had formerly been Rati, the wife of Cupid. When everyone was informed of the mysterious disappearance of Pradyumna and how he had grown up, they were all struck with wonder, because they had gotten back their dead son after they were almost hopeless of his return. When they understood that it was Pradyumna who was present, they received him with great delight. One after another, all the members of the family, Devaki, Vasudeva, Lord Sri Krishna, Lord Balarama, Rukmini, and all the women of the family embraced Pradyumna and his wife Mayavati. When the news of Pradyumna's return spread all over the city of Dwarka, all the astonished citizens came with great eagerness to see the lost Pradyumna. The dead son has come back, they said. What can be more pleasing than this?
Srila Sukdev Goswami has explained that in the beginning all the ladies of the palace, who were all mothers and stepmothers of Pradyumna, mistook him to be Krishna and were all bashful, infected by the desire for conjugal love. The explanation is that Pradyumna's personal appearance was exactly like Krishna's, and he was factually Cupid himself. There is no cause for astonishment. Therefore, when the mothers of Pradyumna and the other women mistook him in that way, it is clear from this statement that Pradyumna's bodily characteristics were so similar to Krishna's that he was mistaken for Krishna even by his mother. Thus ends the Bhakti-Vedanta purport of the 55th chapter of Krishna, Pradyumna born to Krishna and Rukmini.
Chapter 56. The story of the Syamantaka jewel. There was a king of the name Satrajit within the jurisdiction of Dwarka Dham. He was a great devotee of the sun god. who awarded him the benediction of a jewel known as Syamantaka. Because of this Syamantaka jewel, there was a misunderstanding between King Satyajit and the Yadu dynasty. Later, the matter was settled when Satyajit voluntarily offered Krishna his daughter, Satyabhama, along with the Syamantaka jewel. Not only Satyabhama but also Jambavati, the daughter of Jambavan, was married to Krishna on account of the Syamantaka jewel. These two marriages took place before the appearance of Pradyumna, which was described in the last chapter. How King Satyajit offended the Yadu dynasty and how he later came to his senses and offered his daughter and the Syamantaka jewel to Krishna are described as follows.
Since he was a great devotee of the sun god, King Satyajit gradually entered into a very friendly relationship with him. The sun god was pleased with him and delivered to him an exceptional jewel known as Mantaka. When Satyajit wore this jewel in a locket around his neck, he appeared exactly like an imitation sun god. Putting on this jewel, he entered the city of Dwarka, and people thought that the sun god had come into the city to see Krishna. They knew that Krishna, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was sometimes visited by the demigods. So, while Satyajit was visiting the city of Dwarka, all the inhabitants except Krishna took him to be the sun god himself. Although King Satyajit was known to everyone, he could not be recognized because of the dazzling effulgence of the Samantika jewel.
Mistaking Satyajit to be the sun god, some of the important citizens of Dwarka immediately went to Krishna to inform him that the sun god had arrived to see him. At that time, Krishna was playing chess. One of the important residents of Dwarka spoke thus: "My dear Lord Narayana, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In your plenary portion as Narayana or Vishnu, you have 4 hands with different symbols: the conch shell, disc, club, and lotus flower. You are actually the owner of everything, but in spite of your being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, you descended in Vrindavan to act as the child of Yashoda Mata, who sometimes used to tie you up with her ropes, and you are celebrated, therefore, by the name Damodara."
That Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, as accepted by the citizens of Dwarka, was later confirmed by the great Mayavadi philosophical leader Sankaracharya. By accepting the Lord as impersonal, he did not reject the Lord's personal form. Everything which is form in this material world is subject to creation, maintenance, and annihilation. But because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, does not have a material form subject to these limitations, Sankaracharya, to convince the less intelligent men who take Krishna to be an ordinary human being, said that God is impersonal. This impersonality means that he is not a person of this material condition. He is a transcendental personality without a material body.
The citizens of Dwarka addressed Lord Krishna not only as the Damodar but also as Govinda, which indicates that Krishna is very affectionate to the cows and calves. And just to refer to their intimate connections with Krishna, they address him as Yadunandan because he was born the son of Vasudeva in the Yadu dynasty. The citizens of Dwarka concluded by addressing Krishna as the Supreme Master of the whole universe. They addressed Krishna in many different ways, proud of being citizens of Dwarka who could see Krishna daily.
When Satyajit was visiting the city of Dwarka, the citizens felt great pride to think that although Krishna was living in Dwarka like an ordinary human being, the demigods were coming to see him. Thus, they informed Lord Krishna that the sun god, with his glaring bodily effulgence, was coming to see him. The citizens of Dwaraka confirmed that the sun gods coming into Dwaraka was not very wonderful, because people all over the universe who were searching after the Supreme Personality of Godhead knew that he had appeared in the Yadu dynasty and was living in Dwaraka as one of the members of that family. Thus, the citizens expressed their joy on this occasion. On hearing the statements of his citizens, the all-pervasive personality of Godhead Krishna simply smiled. Being pleased with the citizens of Dwaraka, Krishna informed them that the person they described as the sun god was actually King Satyajit, who had come to visit Dwaraka city to show his opulence in the form of the valuable jewel obtained from the sun god.
Satyajit, however, did not come to see Krishna. He was instead overwhelmed by the Samantaka jewel. He installed the jewel in a temple to be worshipped by Brahmanas. He engaged for this purpose. This is an example of a less intelligent person worshipping a material thing. In the Bhagavad-Gita, it is stated that less intelligent persons, in order to get immediate results from their fruitive activities, worship the demigods created within this universe. The word materialist means one concerned with gratification of the senses within this material world. Although Krishna later asked for this Samantaka jewel, King Satyajit did not deliver it. On the contrary, he installed the jewel for his own purposes of worship. And who would not worship that jewel? The Samantaka jewel was so powerful that daily it produced a large quantity of gold. A quantity of gold is counted by a measurement called a bhar. According to Vedic formulas, one bhar is equal to about 21 pounds and one mound equals about 82 pounds. The jewel was producing about 170 pounds of gold every day. Besides that, it is learned from Vedic literature that in whatever part of the world that this jewel was worshipped, there was no possibility of famine, and wherever the jewel was present, there was no possibility of anything inauspicious such as pestilence.
Lord Krishna wanted to teach the world that the best of everything should be offered to the ruling chief of the country. King Ugrasen was the overlord of many dynasties and happened to be the grandfather of Krishna. So Krishna asked Satyajit to present the Samantak jewel to King Ugrasen. Krishna pleaded that the best should be offered to the king, but Satyajit, being a worshipper of the demigods, had become too materialistic, and instead of accepting the request of Krishna, though it was wiser to worship the jewel to get the 170 pounds of gold every day. Materialistic persons who can achieve such huge quantities of gold are not interested in Krishna consciousness. Sometimes, therefore, to show special favor, Krishna takes away one's great accumulations of materialistic wealth and thus makes one a great devotee. But Satyajit refused to abide by the order of Krishna and did not deliver the jewel.
After this incident, Satyajit's younger brother, in order to display the opulence of the family, took the jewel, put it on his neck and rode on horseback into the forest, making a show of his material opulence. While Satyajit's brother, who was known as Prashena, was moving here and there in the forest, a big lion attacked him, killed both him and the horse on which he was riding, and took away the jewel to his cave. News of this was received by the gorilla king, Jambavan, who then killed that lion in the cave and took away the jewel. Jambavan had been a great devotee of the Lord since the time of Lord Ramachandra. So he did not take the valuable jewel as something he very much needed. He gave it to his young son to play with as a toy.
In the city, when Satyajit's younger brother Prashena did not return from the forest with the jewel, Satyajit became very upset. He did not know that his brother had been killed by a lion and that the lion had been killed by Jamvan. He thought instead that because Krishna wanted that jewel which had been delivered to him, Krishna might which had not been delivered to him, Krishna might have therefore taken the jewel from Prashena by force and killed him. This idea grew into a rumor which Satyajit spread in every part of Dwarka. The false rumor that Krishna had killed Prashena and taken away the jewel spread everywhere like wildfire. Krishna did not like to be defamed in that way, and therefore he decided that he would go to the forest and find the Samantika jewel. Taking with him some of the important inhabitants of Dwarka, Krishna went to search out Prashena, the brother of Satyajit, and found him dead, killed by the lion. At the same time, Krishna also found the lion killed by Jamvan, who is generally called Raksha. It was found that the lion had been killed by the hand of Raksha without the assistance of any weapon. Krishna and the citizens of Dwarka then found in the forest a great tunnel, said to be the path to Raksha's house. Krishna knew that the inhabitants of Dwarka would be afraid to enter the tunnel, therefore he asked them to remain outside, and he himself entered the dark tunnel, alone to find the Raksha, Jamvan. After entering the tunnel, Krishna saw that the valuable jewel known as Samantika had been given to the son of Raksha as a toy. To take the jewel from the child, Krishna approached and stood before him. When the nurse taking care of Raksha's child saw Krishna standing before her, she was afraid, thinking he might take away the valuable Samantika jewel, and she cried out loudly in fear.
Hearing the nurse's cries, Jambavan appeared on the scene in a very angry mood. Jambavan was actually a great devotee of Lord Krishna, but because he was angry, he could not recognize his master and thought him to be an ordinary man. This brings to mind the statement of the Bhagavad-Gita in which the Lord advises Arjuna to get free from anger, greed, and lust in order to rise to the spiritual platform. Lust, anger, and greed run parallel in the heart and check one's progress on the spiritual path.
Not recognizing his master, Jambavan challenged him to fight. There was then a great fight between Krishna and Jamvan, in which they fought like two opposing vultures. Whenever there is an eatable corpse, the vultures fight hurriedly over the prey. Krishna and Jamvan first of all fought with weapons, then with stones, then with big trees, then hand to hand, until at last they were hitting each other with their fists. Their blows, like the striking of thunderbolts, Each expected victory over the other, but the fighting continued for 28 days, both in daytime and at night without stopping. Although Jamban was the strongest living entity of that time, practically all the joints of his bodily limbs became slackened, and his strength was reduced practically to nil, for he was struck constantly by the fits of Krishna. Feeling very tired with perspiration all over his body, Jamban was astonished. Who was this opponent who was fighting so hard with him? Jamban was quite aware of his own superhuman bodily strength. But when he felt tired from being struck by Krishna, he could understand that Krishna was no one else but his worshipable Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This incident have special significance for devotees. In the beginning, Jamban could not understand Krishna because his vision was obscured by material attachment. He was attached to his body and to the greatly valuable Shamantaka jewel, which he did not want to spare for Krishna. In fact, when Krishna came there, he was angry, thinking that Krishna had not come to take away the jewel. This is the material position, although one is very strong in body, that cannot help him understand Krishna.
In a sporting attitude, Krishna wanted to engage in a mock fight with his devotee. As we have experienced from the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has all the propensities and instincts of a human being. Sometimes in a sportive spirit, he wishes to fight, to make a show of bodily strength. And when he so desires, he selects one of his suitable devotees to give him that pleasure. Krishna desired this pleasure of mock fighting with Jambavan. Although Jambavan was a devotee by nature, he did not know that his opponent was Krishna while giving service to the Lord by his bodily strength. But as soon as Krishna was pleased by the fighting, Jambavan immediately understood that his opponent was none other than the Supreme Lord himself. The conclusion is that he could understand Krishna by his service, for Krishna is sometimes satisfied by fighting also.
Jambavan therefore said to the Lord, "My dear Lord, I can now understand who you are. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, the source of everyone's strength, wealth, reputation, beauty, wisdom, and initiation." This statement of Jambavan's is confirmed by the Vedanta Sutra, wherein the Supreme Lord is declared to be the source of everything. Jambavan identified Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality, Lord Vishnu. My dear Lord, you are the creator of the creators of the universal affairs. This statement is very instructive to the ordinary man, who is amazed by the activities of a person with an exceptional brain. The ordinary man is surprised to see the inventions of a great scientist, but the statement of Jambavan confirms that although a scientist may be a creator of many wonderful things, Krishna is the creator of the scientist. He is the creator of not only one scientist, but of millions and trillions all over the universe. Jambavan said further, "Not only are you the creator of the creators, but you are also the creator of the material elements which the so-called creators manipulate. Scientists utilize the physical elements of laws of material nature to do something wonderful, but actually, such laws and elements are also the creation of Krishna. This is the actual scientific understanding. Less intelligent men do not try to understand who created the brain of the scientist. They are satisfied simply to see the wonderful creation or invention of the scientist."
Jambavan continued, "My dear Lord, the time factor which combines all the physical elements, is also your representative. You are the supreme time factor in which all creation takes place to maintain is maintained and is finally annihilated. And beyond the physical elements and the time factor, the persons who manipulate the ingredients and advantages of creation are part and parcel of you. The living entity is not, therefore, an independent creator. By studying all the factors in the right perspective, one can see that you are the supreme controller and Lord of everything. My dear Lord, I can therefore understand that you are the same supreme personality of Godhead whom I worship as Lord Ramachandra. My my Lord Ramachandra wanted to construct a bridge over the ocean, and I saw personally how the ocean became agitated simply by my Lord's glancing over it. And when the whole ocean became agitated, living entities like whales, alligators, and Timingala fish all became perturbed. The Timingala fish in the ocean can swallow big aquatics like whales in one gulp. In this way, the ocean was forced to give way and allow Ramachandra to cross to the island known as Lanka. This island is now said to be Ceylon. Lord Ramachandra's construction of the bridge over the ocean became Cape Cameron to Ceylon is still well known to everyone. After the construction of the bridge, a fire was set all over the kingdom of Ravana. During the fighting with Ravana, every part of his limbs was slashed to pieces by your sharp arrows, and his heads fell to the face of the earth. Now I can understand that you are none other than my Lord Ramachandra. No one else has such immeasurable strength. No one else could defeat me in this way.
Lord Krishna was satisfied by the prayers and the statements of Jambavan, and to mitigate Jambavan's pain, he began to lightly rub the lotus palm of his hand all over Jambavan's body. Thus, Jambavan at once felt relieved from the fatigue of the great fight. Lord Krishna then addressed him as King Jambavan because he and not the lion was actually the king of the forest. Having killed a lion with his bare hands without a weapon, Krishna informed Jambavan that he had come to ask for the Samantaka jewel because ever since it had been stolen, his name had been defamed by the less intelligent. Krishna plainly informed him that he had come there to ask for the jewel in order to be free from this defamation. Jambavan understood the whole situation, and to satisfy the Lord, he immediately delivered not only the Simantaka jewel but also his daughter Jambavati, who was of marriageable age, and presented her to Lord Krishna.
The episode of Jambavati's marriage with Lord Krishna and the delivery of the jewel known as Samantak was finished within the mountain cave. Although the fighting between Krishna and Jambavan went on for 28 days, the inhabitants of Dwaraka waited outside the tunnel for 12 days, and after that they decided that something undesirable must have happened. They could not understand for certain that what had actually happened, and being very sorry and tired, they returned to the city of Dwaraka.
All the members of the family, namely Krishna's mother Devaki, his father Vasudev, and his chief wife Rukmini, along with all other friends, relatives, and residents of the palace, were very sorry when the citizens returned home without Krishna. Because of their natural affection for Krishna, they began to call Satyajit ill names, for he was the cause of Krishna's disappearance. They went to worship the goddess Chandrabhaga, praying for the return of Krishna. The goddess was satisfied by the prayers of the citizens of Dwarka, and she immediately offered them her benediction. Simultaneously, Krishna appeared on the scene, accompanied by his new wife, Jambavati, and all the inhabitants of Dwarka and relatives of Krishna became joyful. The inhabitants of Dwarka were as joyful as someone receiving a dear relative back from the dead. They had concluded that Krishna had been put into great difficulties due to the fighting. Therefore, they had become almost hopeless of his return. But when they saw that Krishna had actually returned, not alone but with a new wife, Jambavati, they immediately performed a ceremony of celebration.
King Ugrasen then called for a meeting of all important kings and chiefs. He also invited Satyajit, and before the whole assembly, Krishna explained the incident of the recovery of the jewel from Jamvan. Krishna wanted to return the valuable jewel to King Satyajit. Satyajit, however, was ashamed because he had unnecessarily defamed Krishna. He accepted the jewel in his hand, but he remained silent, bending his head downwards, and without saying anything in the assembly of the kings and the chiefs, he returned home with the jewel. Then he thought about how he could clear himself of the abominable act he had performed by defaming Krishna. He was conscious that he had offended Krishna very grievously, and that he had to find a remedial measure so that Krishna would again be pleased with him.
King Satyajit was eager to get relief from the anxiety he had foolishly created due to being attracted by a material thing, specifically the Syamantak jewel. Truly afflicted by the offense he had committed against Krishna, he sincerely wanted to rectify it. From within, Krishna gave him good intelligence, and Satyajit decided to hand over to Krishna both the jewel and his beautiful daughter Satyabhama. There was no alternative for mitigating the situation, and therefore he arranged the marriage ceremony of Krishna and his daughter. He gave in charity both the jewel and his daughter to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Satyabhama was so beautiful and qualified that Satyajit, in spite of being asked for her hand by many princes, was waiting to find a suitable son-in-law. By the grace of Krishna, he decided to hand his daughter over to him.
Lord Krishna, being pleased with Satyajit, informed him that he did not have any need of the Syamantaka jewel. It is better to let it remain in the temple as you have kept it, he said, and every one of us will derive benefit from the jewel. Because of the jewel's presence in the city of Dwarka, there will be no more famines or disturbance created by the pestilence or excessive heat and cold. Thus ends the Bhakti-Vedanta purport of the 56th chapter of Krishna, the story of Syamantaka jewel.
So, my dear devotees, that concludes our 1 hour of reading Krishna book to Srila Prabhupada. And as we always do, let us offer our respectful obeisances to Prabhupada and to each other. Namo Vishnuvedaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paskacha Deshatarane. And to each other, Vanjakalpadrubhyas Cha Kripa Sindhu Bhayeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Krishna Book. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Shri Gauda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna.